Are you wondering why insurance premiums are skyrocketing or why some insurance companies are leaving the state of Florida? Well, we've got the answers to protect your home and your wallet. And by the way, I'm Tiffany Kurtner, your favorite Northeast Florida real estate agent. And I'm here today with Chris Huebener of Brightway Insurance here in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. And we are going to discuss all things insurance. And if you have any questions or comments about this video, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can call or text me at my phone number. It's in the description box below. So Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, I appreciate you having me, absolutely.
And I must say, I love that jacket.
Oh, it's a good one. My wife
good.
actually made it, so I'm very proud of her, and I'm thankful that she actually put this together.
Very impressive.
Absolutely.
Okay, so are insurance premiums, are they actually skyrocketing?
Yes and no. So basically, the last 5 years have been very difficult for Florida insurance, and it really stems from a lot of fraud, a lot of abuse, and a lot of just really high reinsurance costs. That's the stem part. So yes, rates did increase, but the good news, specifically for this year, is they are stabilizing, and actually we're seeing rate decreases across the board. So we've already hit the worst, but we're actually coming off of that, and we're getting into a much more better budget-friendly environment.
Nice. And did some companies leave the state of Florida?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not all of them did voluntarily. Some actually just went out of business.
Oh.
So it was very difficult. As I mentioned, that last 5 years was something that just really kind of turned the tide a little bit for a lot of insurance companies. So a lot did actually leave altogether. We've got a couple big national brands that also left as well. But the good news, again, as I say, they're actually dipping their toes back into it. And another real positive news, in the last 12 months, there have been over 11 new insurance companies that have been formed and started back into Florida, which basically means more competition, more choice, and better value for people.
Okay, nice. And what goes into a homeownership's policy?
There's so many things going into it, but there's the basics there. So most people get insurance is because they're buying a new house, and it's the mortgage company. The mortgage company is saying, we want to protect our investment because they're lending the money, and so there's certain things that are always going to be built into it. The major thing here for Florida, hurricanes.
Right.
That's the first thing that every lender always wants to see. They want to make sure you have wind coverage, which is hurricane. Other parts to it too would be like replacement costs. You want to make sure if your roof is damaged, you get a new roof on there. You don't get a depreciated roof. The other part to it too, a lot of people don't realize, is liability coverage. So anything that happens on your property, you're ultimately liable for. I've got stories for days as to why you need liability coverage, but one in particular that I always like to share is we had a client who had an Amazon delivery driver, brought boxes to the house, just like we do every single day. I probably have 50 boxes at my front door right now. And so that delivery driver walked through the yard back to his car. He tripped on a sprinkler head and then sued the homeowner.
Oh my God.
So it's crazy. And that's the first thing we always say, like, how is that possible?
Right.
But it is. Anything on your property is ultimately your responsibility. So it ended up going through the process. Thank goodness the client had the right coverage, and it all settled out for her. But that's the biggest thing, is we want to make sure we're covering the dwelling, your liability, and then all your stuff inside the house.
Right.
So your clothes, your TVs, your pots, pans, your toothbrush, literally everything is insured inside your home, because if you had a fire and the whole thing was gone, we want to rebuild your house and we want to put your life back together. And those are the components that really put it in there.
Nice. Okay. And then how does living on the water, since we are here in Florida, whether it's the beach, the intercoastal, or on the St. Johns River, how does that affect your policy?
Yeah, so it really comes down to risk, right? So if you ever study or think about hurricanes, the stronger the storm is when it's over water. So when it becomes over land, it weakens down. So the folks on the ocean, they're the first line of defense for the rest of us, because they're getting hit the hardest. So it really is just a higher risk for those folks. And then on the water side, or the river side, excuse me, flooding. Flooding can actually happen everywhere. So we had two major storms this past year in 2024, Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. Both of those, I like to call them Hurricane Hilton. We kind of put them together because it was in 2 weeks and it was back to back. It was a ton of flooding. So that was the bigger scenario where, yes, it wasn't necessarily just the ocean front or the Gulf side is what it was. It's the canals that go in inside. And that's where water rises, and that's where it happens. So if you're near water, flooding is definitely something you want to consider. but really anywhere in Florida, because we're all ultimately near water at some point or another. But yeah, when you're closer to the ocean and all of that, your wind coverage is going to cost a little bit more because, again, you're that first line of defense versus living in Orlando, for example. They don't really get as many hurricane winds there, but it still could always happen.
Right. So speaking of flooding, so the flood insurance, is it always necessary?
From my standpoint, yes. I would always say it's going to be necessary. But from a mortgage standpoint, there's flood zones that FEMA has designated. So there's high risk and low risk flood zones. Now, everyone always gets in this mind, I'm in a low risk flood zone. I don't need it. But I can tell you, statistically speaking, from FEMA directly, 24% of all flooding occurs in low risk flood zones. And so Florida has a lot of these low-lying flood zones areas. So I'm always a big proponent of having that flood coverage there and just making sure it's built in. It's not ridiculously expensive, and it's something that absolutely will happen at some point. You know, regardless of what you think about climate change or anything, tides are rising. And so water events are happening more and more. And that's why it's much better to have that protection than not. And the other good thing about the flood insurance too, it used to be just a FEMA thing, meaning the government, no one would insure it because it costs too much. But now there's private companies that say, hey, actually, we will take on this risk. We'll sell a policy and take on this risk. So it kind of gives us some more options. So before, when you're just buying it from one company, no matter what they're going to charge, you have to pay for that. Now we've got well over 15 flood insurance companies that say, hey, we might do this here or that there, which makes it really affordable, especially for our inland friends who are, you know, more off the river or anything like that. On the coast, again, FEMA is really kind of the breadwinner there. So that's usually kind of where we go. Another thing about flood insurance that I always like to bring up, it occurs in 99% of all counties in Florida in the last 5 years. So every single county in Florida has had a flood designated by that. So that's what I'm saying. It happens everywhere. You know, I get a lot of clients who are in the middle of the state that say, it'll never happen to me. And it does. And unfortunately, I've had the bad conversations where I'm like, well, remember when you didn't want this and you have this 2 inches of water in your house? There's not much we can do. You know, so I always want people to consider it, and you just weigh your budget. And you know, if you can afford the cost there, which it ranges from $300 to $900 depending, it's worth actually considering and taking on.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
So how can homeowners ensure they have adequate coverage against hurricanes?
Yeah, so we always want to make sure of that, and the mortgage company, like I said, they're looking for their asset. They want to protect it, so we always have that hurricane coverage built in there. But the question is always how much coverage, like how much do we want to make sure we're insuring the house for? And that's where I, as an agent, what I do is I take the specs of the home. So in a real simple way, square footage, year built, construction type, all of that. And we plug that into a replacement cost calculator. And what that does is it spits out a number to me and say, based on these specs, your coverage should be in this range right here. And that's where we start. And it satisfies the bank, right? It satisfies the mortgage. And then we look at that every single year because we want to review that, because sometimes people put in a pool and they don't tell us, or they put in an addition and they don't tell us, or in the last 5 years, cost of wood, right? During COVID, cost of wood and lumber skyrocketed. Well, that means the replacement cost of a house would actually skyrocket. So we always want to look at that thing, and specifically at renewal time, it's usually the easiest, but really it's anytime. I have clients email me all the time to say, hey, can we revisit this? Absolutely. And then we go through the process and we say, okay, what's the square footage? Did we add something? Did we not? Did you make an upgrade? People always upgrade their bathrooms and kitchens. That's always the first thing that when they do. And when they do that, they get better tile. Because if they don't have the builder's grade tile from when it was built, and now you have this beautiful new tile, we want to make sure that we're covering that amount of money that would cost to repair that if it was ever damaged or broken. So, so always reviewing it is the best way to make sure we have the right amount of hurricane coverage, but really just general coverage. If the house burns down too, I want to make sure you're covered there as well.
Okay, so how often do you recommend homeowners review their policies?
At a minimum once a year. At a very minimum once a year. It'll come to you in the mail, or in your email, however it comes. But whenever the policy comes to you, just look it over and say, oh, my house is covered for this number. And if you feel comfortable and it feels right, perfect. tuck it away. Hopefully you never have to use it and call the insurance company and it's all gone. But if you do need to use it, you have that and you look it over. Now, again, if you're looking at it and say, man, this seems a little light, this seems low, or I often get this all the time, is, well, my house could sell for something else and I'm insured for this. And there's a big difference there. So that's a huge thing that I always like to tell people is there's a market value of what you can sell a house for, and then there's a cost to build it. Usually the market value is higher because we're in kind of a high market, you know, and then it includes the land. The dirt's always going to be there. Excuse me. If the house burns down, that land's always going to be there. So we're just looking for the roof, walls, floors is always what we're talking about. But yeah, that's really what we come down to is looking at it once a year at a minimum. And then we just review it. And if everything's happy, we move on and we look on to the next year. But if not, if we want to do something, it's a very simple process. We actually have a whole team that's literally all that they do. They look at the renewals, they review it, make sure it kind of fits the guidelines, and then if a client wants to dig deeper into it, which we're always happy to do, they spend the time, 30, 40 minutes, an hour sometimes, of like, tell me specifically, how many doors do you have in your house? Because a door costs different than a drywall. So you want to know kind of all these different things, and that really kind of helps, and it really kind of appeases people's minds sometime and you know, getting the right coverage.
Nice. Is there any way for homeowners to reduce their premiums or any discounts that you give?
100%, yes. There's all different kinds of things there. The insurance company is wanting to say, how safe is this house? So there's a couple different aspects. The easiest one is alarms. If you've got a monitored alarm by like ADT or SafeTouch or your cable company, anybody, someone that is watching your house is always a discount, specifically for fire and burglary. Those are the two that are, you know, very common there. So that's always an easy discount. But a third one that's been coming up really awesome right now is water monitoring, meaning they put a device either on their water heater or their main supply line or whatever. And if all of a sudden that device spikes, there's several different versions, but one of them will actually just shut the water off for you. So that prevents water damage throughout your entire house. Again, I can tell you claim stories for days. I had a client who was at work, and this was literally this past weekend, at work for 8 hours, whatever it was. She left, everything was fine, came home, she had 1.5 inches of water throughout her entire downstairs floor. And it was devastating, right? So walk her through the process, we go through all that, but had she had this monitor, it would have shut it off for one. There's another version that actually texts you and just says, hey, there's a spike in your water. Do you want to go find it, figure something out? So insurance companies are starting to give discounts for it because it saves them money. There's one company who gave us a statistic is their claims with water damage specifically with the monitoring system are down 44%. And so that saves them money. So they're actually mailing out these sensors to clients for free. Nice. They literally all they have to do is just plug it in and turn it onto their water heater there. And it saves them money, so it saves the client money, and it just protects everyone better. So that's one of the newest, latest ones. Another thing for a discount for sure is the roof. So there was a major building code that changed here in Florida around 2002, 2003, and it specifically had to do with the roof. How it's tied down, how far the nails are spaced, all of these things. Way too deep for me. I'm not a roofer. I don't know. I just know how to get those discounts. So whenever you have a home older than '02, but the roof on after '02, so they replaced the roof. It's a 1980s house or whatever. Getting what's called a wind mitigation inspection. It literally says it. Wind mitigation. How does the house mitigate against the wind damage? That is massive on discounts, depending, of course, on how the roof is tied and all of that. But the closer you are to the ocean, the bigger the discounts because it's protecting against wind damage. So those are the three big things that we always see. Anything else to do with like premiums? Playing with the deductible. So the deductible, of course, is what the homeowner pays first before the insurance kicks in. So if you have a really low deductible, that means the insurance kicks in sooner. But if you bump it up to $1,000 or bump it up to $2,500, whatever's in your budget that's actually comfortable, then you're going to see some discounts. And I always equate it to car insurance. Car insurance is a lot easier to understand because we all drive typically when we're 16 or 17. So if you had a scratch on your bumper, would you call your insurance to get that fixed? Probably not, because the deductible is $500 or $1,000 or whatnot. So the same thing on a home, it's just on a much more larger scale. So if you had a broken window, you don't want to call the insurance. But if you had a kitchen fire where it's major, that's when you call the insurance. So it's having that higher deductible. You save on the premium. The insurance company's happy because they look at you as like, okay, you're taking on more risk. We're happy with you. We're going to give you that discount. So the deductibles are always a good thing. And another thing too would be just looking at the coverages. So I mentioned, we always want to talk about the home, the liability, and then the contents there. Contents coverage is very, user friendly. Like it's their own scenario. So some people are extravagant, some people are very minimalist. And so the industry standard is to do essentially 50% of what the home's insured at is for your content. That's just kind of industry standard. But I've got clients who just want the minimum because they're like, yeah, I'm, just getting out of college. This is my first house and I don't own anything but a couch off of Craigslist. Perfect, no problem. Let's go ahead and keep that as low as possible. But then we've got some other folks who are retirees who have a full house of stuff. And so sometimes they're gonna want more coverage. So really kind of paying attention to that coverage because if you do take it down, no problem. That is also another round of savings too. So keeping those coverages kind of in check is a big thing because contents, I can't tell what someone has in their house, right? That is a full-on, the insured makes that decision. I can talk about the home all day long because there's all that information out there, the size and all that stuff. So there's not a ton of wiggle room there, but the stuff inside, that's definitely a good way to help save some money too.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, since you mentioned claim, what should a homeowner do right after a loss, and how does the claim process work?
Absolutely. So the first thing to do is try to be calm, right? Yeah, that is the biggest
Deep
thing.
breath.
Exactly. Is if you're thinking about it, it's just stuff, right? At that point, right? So just kind of get that down. I take a lot of phone calls throughout the day where people are just very upset, and it's like, okay, I get it. Let's vent a little bit, but we've got now a job to do. So I always say call the carrier or your agent first, right? So in the event of a major claim, you're calling the company right away. You're calling the insurance carrier. In something that's small, like I said, that window breaking, I don't want you to call the company. I want you to call me. I want to have a conversation first so we talk about that, talk about your deductible, but getting something started right away. And then let's say you call the company. What do? So generally speaking, they assess the damage right over the phone. So again, if it's major, you've got water flowing through your house, they are going to get someone out there right away, usually within hours, to stop the water. Because water will turn into mold, will turn into damage and all of that. So they want to prevent that as much as possible. If it's something a little bit smaller where someone broke in and stole your TV, right? Or something like that. Not as urgent as a scenario. So you probably then just fix up the window, you take your pictures and call it a day. So then they get someone out there and they do what's called a field adjustment. So a field adjustment is someone who's out there. They are measuring your floors. They are looking at the drywall and they are putting together all the photos and pictures to say, this is what damaged and this is what the cost would be to repair. That then goes to what's called a desk adjuster. The desk adjuster is someone inside the company, inside the office. They're just reviewing everything, make sure it all looks good, and then they cut the check. So they are the person that actually files a check. So there's a lot of names that happen there. So a lot of people sometimes confuse the field adjuster as they're the person out there doing, the actual, cutting of the check. It's not the case. They're there they're more contractors essentially. They're out there taking pictures, saying, hey, this is what's damaged, this is what's not, and then they give it over to the field adjuster, or excuse me, the desk adjuster, and then they make out that check there. And then that's it. So then you get your money and you choose what you want to do. Now, there are some companies who like to streamline the process, and also it helps save them in cost because, like I said, there was a lot of fraud in the last few years. So there was some, contractors out there and some bad actors that were saying, "Oh, this is $100,000 worth of damage," when really
like
it was
roofs. I remember
probably
that during the hurricane was all.
Exactly. So they have their own contractors too that you can use, which personally I actually like because it's now all handled inside the company. So you've got the damage, they're paying the contractor, they're getting it all done, and they have a vested interest to make sure it's done right because they're still the insurance company. So if that pipe breaks again, well, they're fixing it again, right? They're paying that. So I like the preferred contractor concept that a lot of companies do. Because it just kind of makes it, pretty smooth and easy. I always go back to car insurance. If you had a car insurance claim and your car was hit, oftentimes your carrier will say, hey, go to this body shop and we'll have it fixed and it's all done. It's the same premise. They're just saying, we're going to bring the contract to you and have it all done. And if you choose not to, which is 100% up to you, you can have your own contractor. They'll just cut you the money, you pay your contractor and move on. So that's really it. It's kind of a smooth process. Now, sometimes things go sideways, and I'm not going to pretend that people all love insurance and everything goes well every single time. That's when you get your agent involved. And that's usually the phone calls where I'll get to say, I haven't heard from my desk adjuster. Or I haven't heard from the field adjuster, said he was going to be out here for some photos or something. So it's usually a communication issue. That's really what it comes down to. But that's where I get involved and I say, okay, well, where are we at in the process? What needs to happen? I will say after a hurricane, of course, there's lots of claims. So you've got to give some grace. There's only so many people out there that can do all of this. But for the most part, it moves smoothly, and then you have an agent as an advocate for you. So for me, I don't represent the insurance company. I represent the insured. The client is who I am looking to make sure is taken care of. And that's where I go in and we fight. We fight often to say, hey, I need to get this, where are we at? Why is it not going through? Where's the communication issue? And we escalate it a lot. With our office specifically, we are the #1 Brightway office of the company, which is nationwide. So we are nationwide there. So when I make a phone call to a carrier or to a rep and say, I'm having an issue here, it escalates almost like within the hour where it's starting to be resolved. And that kind of goes along just with our reputation to say, no, we do right by the insured. That is our ultimate goal. And so if the company isn't holding up to their end of the bargain, I then hold them to the end of their bargain. So, yeah.
Great. What impact do home improvements and renovations have on their insurance coverage?
A lot. So from the coverage standpoint, again, if you're upgrading your bathroom or your kitchen, we want to make sure we have those new countertops in there because they could vastly vary from what it was when the house was built or we initially wrote the policy. So any upgrades you want to share with your insurance agent or insurance company. Say, hey, this is what I did. It cost me X number of dollars. We want to make sure that that's accounted for. So that's always a big thing. But the upgrades could also result in discounts or potentially another insurance company to say, oh, you have a new water heater now? Oh, we love that. I'll offer you a much better quote now. So I always tell people, if you're going to do some renovation, just let me know. Like that's really what it comes down to is one, I want to make sure it's covered on your current policy, but we usually then just reshop it. We say, okay, well now you were with company A, but company D really loves new water heaters or new AC units. And so they're willing to give you a much better discount or a much better credit. So if we want to make a change, great, we can do that. And we help through that whole process. But it really can, any upgrades you do to the house will definitely have some form of an impact. Either you want better coverage or it could give you a little bit of a discount as well.
Okay, please explain how Brightway customizes insurance policies to meet the customer's needs.
We listen. That is literally the hardest part. We just listen. And again, because we have people come in and they don't know, no one really knows about homeowners insurance unless you are in the industry. So there's a lot of nuances to it. So people just say, I'm buying a house, my realtor told me to call, my mortgage broker told me to call, what do I do? So we know then there are basic coverages that we want to make sure is included. Again, we satisfy a mortgage, we satisfy kind of the basic needs there, but then we listen. And I often will ask about a dog, or we always ask about a dog because that's part of a policy. If you have one, you want to have some protection there. If you don't, okay, no big deal. I listen to the background of the conversation. If I hear a kid in the background, perfect. Okay, so then I know I need to talk more about life insurance potentially. Like there's some things there that could, really kind of peak up. Really, there's more stuff in the house. I always think, I have 4 kids myself. So our playroom is just full of stuff. So as I think about it, I'm like, well, all that stuff is insured. I want to make sure we're accounting for that. So if someone says, oh, I want the bare minimum here, but I've got a house full of kids, well, I know your house has got a bunch of stuff in there, and we just have a conversation. If someone doesn't want it, no big deal. There's no pressure, but I just listen to what it is they have. One big thing is an umbrella policy that we always like to talk about too, is because, like I mentioned, you can be sued for anything at a house. And so having this layer of an umbrella coverage is definitely something that we always want to discuss, specifically with teenagers, because it goes over your auto insurance as well. And teenagers historically have more car accidents than anybody else, and mom and dad are on the hook for that. So once the car insurance is exhausted, if there's no other policy, the mom and dad are now potentially able to be sued for it.
Okay.
But if you have this nice umbrella policy, then that gives you an additional $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, whatever the coverage is, and that helps protect you. I've had a client right out here on A1A, right here in Ponte Vedra. His 17-year-old daughter was at a light, and she was the second car. The first car went or did not go. She went, right? So from a dead stop, maybe 2 miles an hour. No big deal, little fender bender, all of this stuff. Well, a month and a half later, he got a lawsuit, and it was for $1.2 million. So as he called me, he was upset. Again, I tried to tell him to calm down, but rightfully so.
Okay, it's all right.
When you get a paper that says you just got a lawsuit for 1.2, everyone's definitely kind of clenching. Luckily, we had that umbrella policy.
Nice.
He had actually chosen to get that, which was great. The whole claim ended up settling for less than $50,000. But the whole process was there was a lawsuit for 1.2, and had he not had that, he would not have had an attorney to help out. He wouldn't have, so that's one big thing, is just listening to the client as we're talking.
And what about boats, RVs? Do you do all that?
All the toys.
Under the umbrella?
Oh yes, absolutely. So one big step is I'm always like, okay, what did you call for? Homeowners insurance, let's get that done. And then we have that conversation. So we always say, what else do you have with wheels? You know, if it's a boat, if it's a trailer, if it's a motorcycle, a golf cart. We're in a very big golf cart community here. So those are a big issue. So we always ask to kind of see, what else do you have? And then we just work it one by one. And that's what it comes down to. And ultimately, my thought in the end is, I don't care if you buy an insurance policy from me. I just want you to know that it's available and there's potential for loss. Right? You could have a claim. Again, specifically with kids, it's a huge thing. Nocatee in our backyard here, they have a lot of teenagers that drive the golf carts around, and they're not quite prepared.
Palencia is the same way.
Exactly, Palencia. I mean, any one of these neighborhoods, they let the kids do a little bit more than they probably should, and mom and dad are gonna be on the hook if something goes wrong, and it has. And I've seen firsthand many times, many stories of when it's there, and we always just go back to is, for a few $100s, for this amount of money, it's way better to have the protection than not, and that's what it is.
Great.
Yeah.
So Chris, since you're an insurance agent, but you're not the actual insurance company, does it cost the homeowner money to work with you?
Not at all. Yeah.
Really?
So it's the carrier themselves are the ones who pay us to basically service their policies, is what it is. So that's what I'm saying is I'm not a carrier representative, I am the insured representative. So this way, I'm not stuck with one company. If you have one and you just don't like them for whatever reason, or their rate went up, we look for company B, and I take you to company B. And then next year, I take you to company C. It's all the same to us, is we are paid the same way from the carriers, but it's because we represent you as the client. So there is no payment. I get that question all the time.
Yeah, that's impressive.
If you wanted to pay me, I will gladly take it.
Yeah, we
but,
take tips or wines or however you want to pay us.
But no, it's wonderful that way, and it really then shows that I have the best interests of the insured at heart, because it doesn't matter where it's coming from, and they're not paying me extra to talk to them or anything like that.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. This was an amazing interview, I think.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so yet, please like and subscribe. That will motivate me to continue to put out more content. And if you have any questions about this interview, or buying or selling or investing here in Northeast Florida, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can call or text me. My phone number is in the description below. And if you have any questions about this interview, anything with Chris, you can call me and then I'll call him. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video.